I never imagined I'd call anyone dad again. Not after mine walked out on us when I was 9, leaving my mom and me with little more than a hollow dining room chair and years of silence. My mother, Karen, picked up the pieces as best she could, but some things never glued back quite right. She grew distant, always working, always tired, always somewhere I couldn't reach. So when she married Mark 3 years ago, I wasn't expecting a miracle. He was just another man, I thought. Another name, another face that would eventually fade into the background. But Mark was different. He was charming in a quiet, unobtrusive way. He never tried too hard. He asked about my classes, remembered my favorite tea, and somehow managed to make me feel seen. It started small. Conversations over breakfast, casual jokes while he fixed the leaky sink, shared glances during awkward family dinners that said, "Yeah, this is weird, but we're doing our best." It felt good to be noticed. Not as a burden, not as the reason Mom was exhausted, but as a person with thoughts and feelings and value. I was 22 and juggling college, a part-time job, and the creeping sense that I didn't really belong anywhere. Mark began to fill that space. He offered advice when I was anxious about exams. He drove me to campus when my car broke down and didn't complain once. When my ex-boyfriend cheated on me, it was Mark, not Mom, who sat me down, handed me tissues, and said, "You deserved better. Don't ever forget that." I started to feel safer with him than I did with anyone else. Mom never seemed to notice how often we talked, how frequently we shared inside jokes, or how effortlessly we moved around each other. She was usually exhausted, working double shifts, at the hospital or sleeping through weekends. Mark became the one person I could count on to be present, even if just to listen. Still, I never saw anything wrong. Why would I? I didn't have a template for what a healthy father-daughter relationship looked like. I told myself, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is what I missed all those years. My best friend Ava wasn't so convinced. "Don't know, Em," she said one afternoon as we sat in my room sorting through laundry. "It's great that he's there for you, but doesn't it feel a little too much sometimes?" "Too much?" I frowned. "The way he looks at you, the way you talk about him. I don't know. Maybe it's just me." I shrugged her off. "You're overthinking it. He's just, finally, someone who treats me like I matter." That was true. At least, it felt true then. One night, after Mom had gone to bed early, headache again, Mark and I stayed up watching a movie in the living room. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, laughing at some ridiculous rom-com dialogue. The warmth of the fireplace, the quiet of the house, the flickering screen, it all felt strangely intimate. When the movie ended, I stood to stretch, rubbing my neck. "You've really grown up," Mark said suddenly, eyes lingering a moment too long. "You're stunning, you know that?" The room froze, just for a second. I let out a nervous laugh, brushing it off. Thanks?" He smiled, but something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't the kind of smile a father figure gives. It lingered, too confident, too knowing. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he added quickly, raising his hands like he'd stepped on a landmine. "Just being honest." "It's fine," I replied, forcing another smile. "I should probably head to bed." "Yeah, big day tomorrow?" "No, just tired." I escaped upstairs, heart pounding. Once in my room, I shut the door quietly behind me and leaned against it, confused by the flutter of nerves rising in my chest. I told myself I was overreacting. It was just a compliment, maybe a poorly phrased one. He didn't mean anything by it. Still, I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, its blades spinning like my thoughts. There had been a shift, something I couldn't name yet, but I felt it in my gut. A warning. And once you feel that kind of change, you can't unfeel it. You can only decide what to do next. Absolutely. Here is Chapter 2, 760 words, of Your Infidelity story titled, "I Trusted My Stepfather, Then He Showed Me Who He Really Was." The morning after Mark's comment, Everything felt off. I tiptoed around the kitchen like it was a crime scene. Mark acted normal, whistling as he stirred his coffee, offering me a slice of toast as if the night before hadn't happened. I accepted it with a tight smile, still unsure if I'd imagined the strange shift between us. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. But if that were true, why did my skin crawl when he brushed my hand as he handed me the plate? Days passed, but the tension didn't dissolve. If anything, it thickened, like air before a thunderstorm. Mark didn't repeat the compliment, but he didn't retreat either. He hovered. He lingered in doorways, asked more personal questions, noticed everything. When I changed my hair, he was the first to comment. When I wore a new top, his eyes stayed on me just a second too long. I started wearing hoodies around the house. "You're covering up that beautiful figure," he said once, almost casually. I pretended not to hear him and walked away. Daniel, my boyfriend of 8 months, was kind, predictable, and always on time. He called every night and took me out every weekend. I should have leaned on him, but I didn't. I began withholding things, not lying, but omitting. I didn't tell him how uncomfortable I felt around my own stepfather. I didn't tell him that I was having trouble sleeping again. I didn't even tell him about the toast. Somehow, Mark had become the keeper of my secrets, even the ones I never meant to share. Mom remained oblivious. She was either asleep or working, barely threading conversations together at dinner. She didn't notice the awkward pauses between Mark and me, or maybe she did and chose to ignore them. Denial has a way of disguising itself as peace. One rainy afternoon, I found myself alone in the living room, flipping through a textbook I wasn't really reading. Mark came in, carrying a cup of tea he'd made, just the way you like it. "Thanks," I mumbled, accepting it with reluctant politeness. He sat across from me, legs crossed, the storm tapping lightly against the windows. "I don't know what's going on with your mother," he said suddenly. "She's been distant, cold." I looked up from my book. "She's stressed. Work has been insane." He sighed, swirling his mug in his hands. "I just feel like a ghost sometimes, like I don't even exist in this house unless the sink's leaking." I didn't respond. "You ever feel like that? Invisible?" His voice was softer now, tinged with something raw. I nodded faintly, unsure where this was heading. "You're different, though," he said. "You see people. You listen. You're kind." My stomach tightened. "You remind me of how I used to feel when I first fell in love, with someone who actually gave a damn." He reached over and placed his hand on mine. I froze. It wasn't a fatherly touch. It was possessive, intentional. My skin prickled under his fingers. "I think about you more than I should," he said, voice low. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." I pulled my hand away as if burned. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't." The air turned heavy, silence stretching between us like a razor-thin wire. He leaned back, lips pressed into a line. "I didn't mean to upset you. I just needed you to know." "I need to go," I said quickly, grabbing my book and heading upstairs, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own footsteps. In the sanctuary of my room, I collapsed onto the bed, hands shaking. I stared at the ceiling again, but this time the fan didn't spin. Everything felt still, suffocating. What had I done to make him think this was okay? Had I smiled too much? Laughed too loudly? Spent too much time with him? I wanted to scream, to scrub the moment from my memory, but it was etched there now, permanent, undeniable. That night, I didn't sleep again, and for the first time, I didn't blame my insomnia on stress. The next few days were a blur of avoidance. I left the house earlier than usual, returned later, stayed in my room with the door locked. Mark didn't try to speak to me again, but his presence lingered, ghost-like, in every creak of the floorboards. When Ava called and asked if I was okay, I almost told her. But something held me back. Shame? Fear? Both? I looked at myself in the mirror that night and barely recognized the girl staring back. The girl who once wanted a father. The girl who thought she'd found one. But now I knew better. I thought silence would make it go away. If I stayed quiet, avoided him, maybe Mark would shrink back into the role he was supposed to play. Supportive, distant, irrelevant. But silence has a way of feeding shadows. It gave him room to think. I was complicit, and worse, it gave me room to start blaming myself. The pressure built like a storm behind glass. Every smile felt fake. Every word around my mother caught in my throat like splinters. One morning, as I stared blankly into my untouched cereal, Mark walked in and hovered behind me for a beat too long. "You're still not talking to me," he said softly. I didn't look up. "I made a mistake," he continued, voice low, calculated. "But we both felt something, didn't we? That connection, it's real." The air in the kitchen turned to ice. I stood up slowly, gripping the counter to steady my shaking hands. "No, Mark, you felt something. I felt safe. And you twisted that. You're not confused. You're a grown man who crossed a line." He stepped back, his face flickering between surprise and something darker. "Let's not be dramatic, Emily." "You kissed me," I snapped. "You're married to my mom." His composure cracked. "She doesn't even love me. Not like you." "Don't," I hissed. "Don't you dare try to drag me into your mess." I stormed out, heart racing, the kitchen walls suddenly too small. The illusion had shattered. There was no gray area now. No more, "Maybe he didn't mean it." He meant every word. That afternoon, I went to Ava's place. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. "You were right," I whispered against her shoulder. It wasn't just weird, it was real, and it's worse than I thought. We sat on her porch as I spilled everything. Every touch, every word, every moment I'd second-guessed myself. Her expression shifted from concern to rage. "You have to tell your mom," she said firmly. "I can't," I muttered. "It'll destroy her." "And what's it doing to you, Em? Letting him walk around like nothing happened? Pretending you're okay?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She was right. My silence was protecting the wrong person. That night, I waited until my mother got home from work. She looked exhausted, her hospital badge still dangling from her collar. I asked her to sit down. She sensed something was wrong immediately. "What is it? Did something happen?" I took a breath so deep it felt like I was drowning before the first word even left my lips. "It's Mark," I began. "Something happened. Something you need to know." As I told her everything, her expression morphed from confusion to disbelief, then slowly to horror. I expected denial, maybe even anger toward me. But when I showed her the necklace he'd given me, the one I had hidden in a drawer like it was radioactive, her face crumpled. She stood up, pacing the living room in a daze. I don't understand. He said he loved us, that he was happy. He kissed me," I said softly. "And when I confronted him, he tried to say it was mutual." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply turned, grabbed her phone, and called him. "You need to get home, now." The next 20 minutes were a quiet storm. My mother sat still, rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. When Mark arrived, the door slammed behind him like a gunshot. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze darting between us. Karen stood. Her voice didn't waver. "Emily told me everything." His smile faltered. "She misunderstood." "She didn't," my mother snapped. "And don't insult me by pretending otherwise." She slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed. "You're done here. Pack your things and get out." He stared at her, stunned, then glanced at me with something venomous in his eyes. But he didn't argue. He turned and walked upstairs. Within the hour, he was gone. Afterward, the silence in the house felt heavier than his presence had. My mother apologized through tears she tried to swallow, ashamed of not seeing it sooner. I told her it wasn't her fault. I wasn't. Sure, I believed that, but I wanted her to. The healing didn't come quickly. I ended things with Daniel a week later. I needed space. I needed to rediscover who I was without fear curling beneath my skin. Therapy helped. So did Ava. Months passed. And now, when I look back, I don't feel shame. I feel strength. He betrayed me, but he didn't break me. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it tears everything apart.